Oakley dokley, one more thing to talk about with modules. I mentioned that overall the TypeScript import syntax and export syntax, everything we've covered in the last couple of videos, mirrors ES modules, but there are some relatively small differences, and in this video I'm going to highlight one of them that has to do with importing types, sharing types between files. So at the moment, we've been importing functions, classes, constants, or variables even, but nothing that is a type, nothing that disappears when the code is compiled, right? Everything we've written, every function in every class here, this function, they still exist in our JavaScript. But what if I made a new file that just holds types, types.ts. This is where I want to put my interfaces. So I'll have an interface, person that has a username that's a string. Let's just have it match, username and email that are a string. And then let's have some type for some union type, what should it be? Colors? Sure. Color. Let's be consistent here. And it can be red, green, or blue. Okay, so we have two different types, and I want to export these. One is an interface, one is a type alias, but I want to export these and use these in my code somewhere else and share them. So I've exported them. Now, can I import these? These only exist in TypeScript. Does that mean that I have trouble when I import them? Does it work? Can TypeScript figure it out? Well, let's go over to my user file and let's import that person interface. So import person from types.js. And it seems to work, right? Person is an interface for this person object. And then I could use it in here. I could say this class implements person. If you remember how we can write a class that implements an interface, there we go. It looks good. But then the question is, what happens when I actually compile this code? So let's try that. Let's run tsc. Okay, no complaints so far. But let's look at our code that is generated. So this is my user file. Here's our types.js file, and it's totally empty. All that this does is it declares something as a module. And then in our user.js, come back here, there's nothing around the person interface, right? We just have our user class that we're exporting, and our user helper function. But that import and the export, because they had to do with a type, they didn't make it into JavaScript, which is good. That's what we want to happen. That's how it should behave. But it is kind of a weird situation where we are importing and exporting code on TypeScript, but then that code should basically disappear, and the import and export should disappear as well. And that's normally the behavior. But there are edge cases, there are situations where you might be surprised things don't behave the way you expect, especially if you're using a transpiler other than TypeScript, something like Babel, for example. You may run into an issue when you are importing types. So TypeScript, I think in version 3.8 or something around that area, introduced a new piece of syntax to the import statement. So this is not valid JavaScript. This is TypeScript only, and it looks like this. Import type, and then we import whatever we want. And as you'll see on the docs here, it says import type is always guaranteed to be removed from your JavaScript, and tools like Babel can make better assumptions about your code. So it's just a safer way of importing a type where you know that there will be nothing left over when it's compiled to JavaScript. But again, it only works to import types. If you're importing anything else, like functions or classes, you don't want to be doing that. So just a quick note, that's what it is if you see that import type. Additionally, you may see it done like this in more recent versions of TypeScript, where you can put the type inside of the named imports, and then you could have something else that is not a type that you're importing. So this would just tell TypeScript, this thing we're importing from types is a person type, and this thing, ask-a-jask-a-log-a, is not a type. It's a function or a class or something. All right, so just a tiny tweak to the syntax, but it's also proof of the fact that these modules that we're working with are TypeScript modules. It's not exactly the same as ES modules, even though the syntax is almost identical. It can get a little confusing, but thankfully it's a lot easier these days than it was when you had to deal with namespaces and all of that. Now we just use import and export, and it's virtually the same as ES module imports and exports. Oh, I suppose I should show as well, we don't end up with anything in our compiled JavaScript, but we actually weren't ending up with anything previously. So it's not much of a difference. We still don't see anything in here around that person interface. We don't see an import person. We didn't see it earlier either. Remember, it's normally not a problem, but as the docs mentioned, it can be an issue when you're working with other transpilers like Babel. So to be safe, you can import types this way.